Hark how the bells, sweet silver bells, all seem to say, throw cares away. Christmas is here, bringing good cheer to young and old, meek and the bold. Ding dong, that is the song with joyful ring, all caroling. One seems to hear words of good cheer from everywhere, filling the air. Oh, how they pound, raising their sound. Oh, hill and dale, telling the tale. Gaily they ring, while people sing songs of good cheer. Christmas is here. Merry, 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 merry Christmas. Merry, merry, merry Christmas. Song with joyful ring, how caroling. One seems to hear words of good cheer from everywhere, filling the air. Oh, how they pound, raising the sound. Oh, here's their telling their tale.
Hello friends, welcome back to Vlogmas. Starting a new vlog today. It is December 5th. And this is my hair clip. So I just barely finished When Heroes Fall last night by Gianna Darling, and I waited to start a new audiobook. So this morning, well actually I got it all set up last night, but this morning I started listening to The Devil Gets His Due by Elizabeth O'Rourke. This is her newest release, and I'm actually really liking it. I just filmed a video today talking about favorite new to me authors, and I put Elizabeth O'Rourke on there, and then I realized that I have only read 4 books from her. Not only, but I read 4 books from her this year, and I really liked 2 of them, and I really did not like 2 of them. So I have been excited about this, but I've also been super nervous because I feel like sometimes Elizabeth O'Rourke, for me, knocks it out of the park, and other times I'm just like, was this written by a completely different author? And I'm not sure where I'm gonna fall on this one, because this is okay, so the heroine is a doctor, and she is like the I don't love her character so far, because I feel like she is kind of acting a little stupid. Like some of the decisions that she makes, even like just the way that she talks to other people, like how she's a little bit over the top, in your face, sleep around type of girl. It just feels like a bit much, you know? But I'm gonna keep my mind open, because the books that I've loved by Elizabeth O'Rourke, she has done character development really well. So I'm excited to see what she does with her. So I'm not 100% put off that I don't like her character, first of all, because honestly, I really never am. It really depends on what the author does with that character, and how much growth they have, and how, like, subtle and how it feels real. Like, I mean, obviously when we're reading fiction, I think this is something that I find difficult to talk about sometimes. I always want my books to feel real. I want them to have a feeling of reality, or I guess a better way to say it is I want them to feel grounded in realism. And I mean, I don't want to have like big abrupt like personality changes, or big abrupt plot things that just like come out of nowhere. Like I want the characters to feel like they're naturally evolving, given the natural evolving circumstances that happen in the story. Like that's the perfect book for me. And I feel like sometimes when I say that, I either don't do a good job of communicating that, or people assume that I like slow, boring books. And like, I do, okay? I like a book that you can like savor and sink your teeth in. But I just mostly want the story to feel real. I want it to feel real to me. That doesn't mean it has to be like show me everything they did in their day and be super slow and boring. I just want the story to feel real, because if it doesn't feel real to me, then I'm checked out, you know? And I think this is something that is really interesting, because this is, again, where personal taste comes in. Like, what... Honestly, I feel like some people don't approach fiction in that way, and they're just looking for something escapist, and so when big, overdramatic events happen, like, that's what they're looking for, you know? But when that happens, I'm like, are we serious now? Like, when something, like, super dramatic sexually happens right away, I'm like, are we serious right now, you know? And that's kind of what I was talking about when I was just discussing the Gianna Darling book, specifically their first sex scene after her surgery. Like, that was just so completely unrealistic, and I'm not going to have an argument for how realistic sex scenes in romance novels should be, but I definitely feel like, particularly with endometriosis and after a surgery, like, I was hoping for it to feel a little more realistic and not so much of a fantasy, you know what I mean? But personal taste comes in there to play too. So, heroine, not a huge fan of her yet, looking forward to her character development. This is definitely like an opposites attract, where they're also a little bit enemies, which Elizabeth O'Rourke does pretty often. I don't know that I would say enemies, maybe antagonists. So the hero is kind of like a hot nerd, basically, it sounds like he's very attractive, hot guy, but like she's constantly making references to how he's like nerdy, and he does like taxes, and like constant references to that. And then, wouldn't you know it, she wakes up in his bed and they had a drunken one-night stand, and it happens repeatedly. And so, but she never really remembers what happens, and there's nothing else building that relationship other than they end up having drunken one-night stands a couple of times. Anyway, so you can see I'm skeptical about this book, right? I'm skeptical, and I want to love it so bad, because I feel like I've had a string in December of books that haven't been terrible. I've actually had 3 and 4 star reads, and I really want a 5-star read. Speaking of 5-star read, I'm almost done with Anastasia, but I'm not done with it yet. It comes out tomorrow. So today, the plan is to finish that freaking book. Okay, so the hero, they end up having like drunken one-night stands several times. Neither of them can remember them. They wake up and they're like, what just happened? And then we see condom wrappers, and then, oh, by the way, I think we got married in Vegas. Like, I vaguely remember we were drunk and we got married in Vegas. They did. And then, I don't think this is a spoiler. Like, the whole trope is they got married in Vegas and then she ends up pregnant. So surprise pregnancy is a huge part of this trope. And I know a lot of people are not going to like that, right? I personally love pregnancy, babies, marriage. I do. I love all that stuff. I want that stuff. Now, please don't come for me, anybody who's watching this, because I'm not saying all romance novels need to have that. I'm not saying that at all, but I am saying that my personal taste gravitates towards happily ever afters or stories revolving children, pregnancy, babies, marriage. I just love that stuff, okay? And it's okay if you don't, but I do, and unapologetically I do. I feel like that's become more and more of a common theme that I'm hearing, that romances don't need to have that, or that I've even heard people say they shouldn't have that, and I just certainly don't agree with that. Like, definitely that doesn't need to be what every romance novel has. Like, absolutely that does not need to be a thing. But, like, that's my life. I got married, I had babies, and I loved it. I love my life, and I love reading about that. I mean, I also love reading about books where they don't end up like that, where it's career driven or they don't want kids. Like, I just love a really well-told story is what I'm getting at. And is this book by Elizabeth O'Rourke going to be a well-told story with a great romance? I hope so. I really, really hope so. At this point, I'm not sure. I am, however, really enjoying the audiobook, and I'm definitely getting swept away in it. So that's good news. All right, I have rambled quite a bit. Oh! Tea. Tea tasting. I got my horsey mug again. Stacy, I just love this mug so much. And it's just perfect for a single serving of tea. It smells so good. The tea flavor is rooibos. Come on, focus. Rooibos. I've covered my eyes. There we go. Rooibos pecan turtle. I am so sorry that I said that word 3 times. Rooibos pecan turtle. Smells delicious. And it's so good. Oh, I love this flavor. This feels so cozy, so comforting. It does have a really nutty flavor, and oh, it's just so good. This is one of my favorite teas. I love this one so much. Rooibos pecan turtle. Absolutely love it. Love it so much. Okay, my friends, I will come back once I finish this book or tomorrow, and I'll check in with y'all later. Thanks for joining me for another daily vlog. I appreciate each of you who have been watching my videos. You know, it's a big undertaking to film a video every day, and I just want to say that my vlogs definitely get more engagement than I think some people think theirs do, relatively to how many followers they have. I feel like a lot of you are here for my vlogs, and I love that. But I just want to say thank you for watching, because it would be absolutely no fun if I made these videos and nobody was watching them. So thank you for watching, and I'll see y'all in my next clip.
Up over Mars, you trim a tree, I put up a star. I wear a sweater, it's down to my knees, and you will kiss the freckles on both of my cheeks, and we will sing our own Christmas song. So when you wait, there'll be snow in the sky. You sing so softly, yeah, only we hear about the love you promised for all of our years, and we will sing our own Christmas song.
Hello friends, it's December 6th, and in case you were wondering if I'm wearing the same sweatshirt, no, I am not. I really like cropped hoodies to wear to the gym. Like, they're not as bulky as a full hoodie, and I like especially wearing them in the winter. But I started doing this in the summer when the gym was air conditioned, and I just really, really liked how, this is gonna sound weird, like I just really enjoyed the feeling of just like sweating and just like getting drenched, and I just really, really love that. So I wear a hoodie to the gym now, but I like them cropped. This is my Sophie Lark hoodie. I have two. Okay, anyway. So I did finish Anastasia, so let's talk about it really quickly. So I decided not to vlog my reading journey of Anastasia, and that's mostly because it is such a long book. It's 857 pages, I believe, and I knew there's no way I was going to read that in 2 days, which is how long I'm keeping these vlogs, is for 2 days. And you know, like when I read Game of Thrones, which was about that many pages, it took me a whole week to read it. So this book definitely took me a while to read, but that's just because my life is very busy and I have very little time to sit down and read, you know. So I read the book, I read Anastasia. I have tried so hard to stay away from any sort of review or opinion or reaction to Anastasia. Like, that's what I prefer to do with an author that I love who has a new book coming out, and Sophie Lark is definitely an author that I love. So I really didn't know anybody else's opinion about this book. So I went into this not quite sure what to expect. I will say that every single book of Sophie's that I have read, and I have read almost her entire backlist. There are a few books in her Underworld series which I haven't read, but I've read all of her books, basically, other than those. So with every release that she's had in the last few years, I'm sorry, my hair keeps getting on my face and it drives me absolutely nuts. With every new release she's had in the last few years, I've been lucky to get an ARC. And I have been absolutely impressed with the dramatic increase in her writing ability during that time. So I started reading her 2021, spring of 2021. And with every new release she's had, including The Savage, which I know a lot of people didn't like, I gave that book 5 stars. It's definitely not the best romance I've ever read, but overall, the book as a whole is impressive and solid, and I really, really particularly like what she does with characters in there. And I love gritty, dark movies and books like that, like Breaking Bad and The Crow. And that's sort of what The Savage reminded me of in a little way. So anyway, I know a lot of people hated it. I didn't. And I think that the reason that I am able to sort of separate my feelings about some of Sophie's books that don't 100% land as a solid swoony romance like The Savage, or I would even say like there are parts in the Sinners books, like the Sinners Duet isn't a swoony romance to me. Like Broken Vow is a swoony romance, like Ivan is a swoony romance, you know. I even think The Heir is very swoony. Anyway, sorry, this video isn't all about Sophie Lark, but I wanted to kind of give you my background on her writing and my opinion as it has developed over time as I've continued to read her books as they've released. Something that I find really impressive about Sophie's books is how she puts words together. And she does the thing that I really, really love, where she uses a lot of brevity. She's not an overly flowery writer, but in every single book, she has at least two or three lines, sentences, maybe short paragraphs that are deeply impactful about love or about being human or being a woman, you know, like, and those lines stick with me so much that I honestly have a hard time. I'm not letting that impact my review and bumping it up because I find that so impressive on a craft level, on a technique level. I just find that very impressive. So all of that being said, one of the reasons I'm so harsh about craft and technique for writers is because that's the vehicle for telling your story. If you're not proficient or if you have flaws with your technique, just like an artist, a painter, it's going to show in your finished work, and it doesn't matter what emotion you're trying to get across. If your craft is poor or underdeveloped or it has big flaws, the impact isn't going to be there. So, Anastasia, in my opinion, is a masterwork in craft. I feel like the writing ability, just on a craft level, on a technique level, in Anastasia, I think is extremely high. I think that she really is able to capture that feel and voice of a period piece of Anastasia. So it almost reads a bit like a historical romance in that way, just the way that the characters are talking, even the way that the story is narrated itself. I really enjoyed that. I felt like this is also an excellent case study in how Sophie builds and develops characters. I love what she does with characters. I think she does some of the best character work in romance novels today. I just absolutely love how she does that. How she builds not only just her heroine, but the hero as well. And also, most importantly, how she builds those characters to come together. And all of those three aspects, they have slightly individual journeys, but the big journey is them in their romance together. So I was very impressed with that in this story. I think the side characters in here, the family, the setup was all extremely well done. I also really, really loved, like, Rasputin in here was fascinating. One of the best representations of him, reimagined in a way that is fascinating and compelling and makes you very sympathetic and understanding with him, but also, like, he is villainous. Like, gosh, just, like, I love it so much. So, I loved everything about this book. I gave this book 6 stars. The fantasy elements in here, so because this is an Anastasia retelling, this isn't a high fantasy book. It's not set in an alternate fantasy world. It is set in our world with the Romanov family, reimagined. So the magical elements, the fantasy elements are sort of ingrained in there. So in a way, it's a bit of a, it's not an urban fantasy, but it's definitely not a high fantasy. But I loved that so much. I think that she blended the fantasy elements, the magic, really, really well with keeping it feeling like a historical fiction novel. They had a really good blend. And that's another thing that I really loved about this book. I've often talked recently about how I would prefer in a fantasy romance for the fantasy world to be more developed if, this is the caveat, if the author is going to lean in one direction, if it's going to be overly spicy, or if it's going to be overly world building and fantasy and that's really well done, I would prefer that. My ideal, always the ideal, is for them to be a perfect blend of the two. I want the fantasy element to hold enough weight to be compelling, interesting, unique, well crafted. Like that's one of the things I am harshest about, is does the fantasy world feel real? Or does it just feel like a hastily thrown together fantasy because, you know, whatever author wanted to ride the spicy fantasy romance train? And Sophie built this fantasy world so well. It was subtle, it was clever. I mean, you know, keep in mind this book is very long, so she takes quite a while to build the story. And I love that because, as I said earlier, I love nuance, I love subtlety. I want to get immersed and sink my teeth into a book, and that's exactly what you will get here. The romance in here did carry equal weight to the fantasy, but because you're following Anastasia, you start the book out when she's just a young girl. So don't go into this expecting a super spicy romance, fantasy romance, right? This is not sex with swords at all. This is a beautifully well-crafted fantasy world with a beautifully slow-building romance that these characters started when they were children. And the thing that I think Sophie does really well, because I've also been harsh about this in the past, is she makes their childhood very believable and very believable for the ages they are. She doesn't give them emotions and feelings that a 30-year-old character would have. She gives them very age-appropriate feelings and emotions. And like, hallelujah, thank you so much. That is a huge pet peeve of mine. I loved this book so much. It was deeply, achingly romantic. It was really well thought out and well developed. The prose was beautiful, but not overly so. But at times, it just like hits you with its impact and its emotion. There are lines in here that I read that I'm like, I will remember this forever. So I adored this book. This is on my top books of the year. This is definitely in my top 10 books of the year. This gave me everything that I wanted in a fantasy romance, specifically, very specifically. This was also a really beautiful Anastasia retelling. I wasn't quite sure what fantasy elements she was going to put into this because typical Russian mythology fantasy elements are much different than what you find in here, but I really liked Sophie's brand of that. I thought that was really, really good. So yeah, I was very impressed with this. One of my favorite books of the year. Slow building and subtle and nuanced and just beautifully well crafted in every way. And I do love the cartoon Anastasia. I remember going to see that in the theaters when I was like a teenager. I loved seeing little, like, so this isn't a direct retelling of that cartoon. It is a reimagined tale of the actual Anastasia and the Romanov family, but she did put in little nods to the cartoon that if you love the cartoon, you'll pick those up and you'll just be delighted, and I just love that. So this was fantastic. This was everything that I hoped for or wanted from Sophie for an Anastasia retelling, and it was just a pure delight. So now that I have kept this hopefully video to 25 minutes, I'm going to end here. Thank you for listening to me ramble. I'm almost done with the Elizabeth O'Rourke book, and I'll update you with that in my next vlog. And now let's do our tea tasting. Today we have Black Forest cake. That's so good. Like, this is another flavor that's just very mellow and rich, and a little bit like the cherry notes in here are a little subtle. And it has hints of chocolate. Like, this is just so good. I love this one so much. So, thank you for watching this vlog. I'm so glad y'all are here joining me for Vlogmas. And if you would like to leave me an emoji, feel free to leave me a reindeer emoji. And I'll see y'all in my next video.